Welcome everybody to the Hilton Distinguished Entrepreneur Speaker event. I see this Hilton Distinguished Entrepreneur Speaker Series as our marquee event of the year, in my opinion. Marquee event certainly for the College of Business. And we've got a wonderful Hilton Distinguished Entrepreneur today, Sean Kane. By the way, he's also our Wall of Honor honoree. His plaque is on the third floor. Anybody seen it? Anybody notice? Okay. Now you'll notice. Now you'll notice. Okay. And you are, yeah.
Childhood friends.
Okay. So you're biased. Okay. So you like Sean. Okay.
I don't like
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me introduce you to our speaker and the moderator. Let's start with Sean. Wow. I haven't even said anything. I haven't even said anything. But, all right. Sean is a serial entrepreneur. Of course, an LMU alum from the class of last century, 1999. He co-founded and served as CEO of The Honest Company. Any of you heard of The Honest Company? Okay, good. Hello Bello. Anybody heard of Hello Bello? Yeah. And launched LA. His passion as an entrepreneur is rooted in building and leading teams. I know Sean talks about teams a lot, as well as developing ideas into innovative products and businesses. Before launching his own brands, Sean started his career as an accountant. Is that right? Just checking. I thought I knew, but I was just checking. At Arthur Andersen, and then went on to be at the forefront of e-commerce. Remember, he worked at Price Grabber, online price competition website. During his entrepreneurial journey, Sean has always been focused on creating better and safer products and better and safer world for everybody. Okay? Let's move to Professor Sona Gala. Professor Sona is a clinical associate professor of business law with over 25 years of legal experience, which is amazing since she's only 35 years old. She's also a double alum of LMU, 96, and Loyola Law, 99. Professor Gala, is a part of a successful family business that specializes in restaurants, real estate, and commercial software. And she's a valuable member, actually, an advisory board member of our family business entrepreneurship program that we are growing at LMU. So please welcome Sean Kane and Professor Sona Gala.
Can y'all hear me? Hey. Thank you, David, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to all for joining us. And thank you, Sean, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited.
And thank you all for coming. I thought it was only going to be my best friend from the second grade and my sister, so this is great.
We've surpassed your expectations, clearly.
Yeah. Significantly.
Okay, so I want to start out by kind of doing a little bit of this is your life, Sean Kane, if that's okay, a little bit of your history.
Sure.
All right. So we know you graduated from LMU back in '99, and I'd love it if you could walk us through your LMU experience, right? So tell us a little bit about, excuse me, my paper. What were some of your favorite memories, classes, activities that, maybe help prepare you for your work experience, or that you honestly just enjoyed? Because quite frankly, this place is pretty awesome and there's a lot of great stuff to do here and we love it. So tell us about your experience.
Well, back in 1995, the campus looked very different. It was still beautiful. There was still Alumni Mall, but the dorms system was very different. There was Wayland, there was Rosecrans, there was Doheny. McCarthy was built my sophomore year. There was Hannon, and there was McKay, and that was it. So if you wanted to live on campus, your choices weren't like they were today. Before we got into our sophomore dorm, we managed to figure out how to put a satellite dish facing out of our window to get DirecTV for cable.
That's literally amazing.
Because there was no cable when I came here. I don't know if there is now, but I'm guessing probably.
Is there cable people?
I'm guessing YouTube now, TV.
They're on their computers.
Yeah.
Nope, they're streaming.
There's no- yeah,
They're
they don't
streaming.
even have
No one's
TVs.
watching a TV. They're streaming.
But I was really involved in LMU. Early on, I got into what was accounting because of another student that was 1 year above me. His name was Troy Baranchek, and he was the class of, I think, 97, Lisa?
Yes. No, 98.
98?
No, 97, because I was
And-
96.
And you know, I was in such a rush to get out of school as soon as I got in that I didn't realize how amazing school was until I was well into the accounting curriculum. So by the time I was a junior, I decided I didn't want to get out of school as quick as I can, but it took me a while to get there. So I joined accounting in the Accounting Society, and I became a leader in that organization. And I would go on after school to go to Arthur Andersen, where I went into accounting. The interesting thing was, while at LMU, most of the accounting staff kind of took me aside and said, "Are you sure you want to go into accounting?" And this was coming from the accounting staff. And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Why would you ask?" And they said, "Well, you don't fit the typical profile of somebody in the accounting program." And I thought that was interesting because accounting is one of those fields that when you learn how to read a balance sheet and an income statement, and you learn how the risks of a business and the controls that mitigate those risks ultimately impact the successful outcome of that business, you realize that the basis for so much of that business depends critically on just those fundamentals. And so that's really what I carried through kind of to the rest of my, and through to my career. Also at LMU, I was involved in the Student Senate. I was in the manager program. So at the time it was rec sports, which doesn't look like it does today.
Nope.
And the gym was much more like, you know, I live in Texas now, so it was kind of like a high school gym from Texas.
It's like, it was one room. It was a one-room gym.
It's like half of the size of this room, or a quarter of the size of
Yes.
this room. And, but the amazing thing about that experience is that facility was open more hours and had more staff than any other facility in campus. So in a world where we were open from 6 a.m. to 11 or 12 p.m., we had to staff it full time. We had to coordinate all of the programs. We did all of the payroll, and we did all of the cultural team building. So we would take the team paintballing, and we would take them to big lunches and hunts, and we would really kind of foster the ultimate culture. I think it was there that I first learned how critically important it was to build a team that is all working towards the same goal, collaboratively, collectively, and coming up with new ideas to make something that's been around for a long time seem new and fresh.
Okay, and we're going to talk teams, we're going to talk culture with you. But I first want to talk a little bit about the fact that so you finish up at LMU, you've gotten this accounting degree, and you go to Arthur Andersen, which you just mentioned. I want to know, how did you know that Andersen was the right fit for you? What led you to take a job there?
Well, they were one of the only firms that gave me an internship.
Okay, that's fair.
So in a world where my grades weren't the best, but I really enjoyed kind of going to the happy hours where they paid for drinks for us.
That's fair.
They gave me an internship, so I went.
Okay.
And that's kind of, you know, how I followed my career. But I went to Arthur Andersen, and I was there for almost 2.5 years. And in the back of my mind, I knew it was kind of going to be where I learned what those fundamentals of business needed to be. Yeah. And the singular event that changed the course of where I was and put a fork in the road for me was Enron. Does everybody remember Enron? So Enron, they were auditing, or Arthur Andersen was auditing Enron. And Enron was accused of financial malfeasance and ultimately convicted, but Arthur Andersen was complicit or named to be complicit in that action. And ultimately, the Department of Justice pulled Arthur Andersen's accounting charter, which meant that a firm that was, I don't know, 100 years old with 50,000 people was suddenly out of the accounting business, which meant the firm was out of business. So our entire practice was transferred to Ernst & Young. And I remember I was at the Biltmore Hotel in the ballroom. And we were listening to the new partners talk about what their business audit was and how they were so excited to have us. And wow, it's going to be really amazing. And I went up to the partner from Andersen that was there with us that day, and I said, "Hey, I know it's the break time and there's a lot left today, but I'm not coming back after the break. And he said, really, why not? And I said, I think this is the moment that I'm going to make the change that I always knew was coming. And I don't want to waste anybody's time with another transition that I'm not 100% on board with. And so I packed up my stuff and I walked out the door. And the amazing thing is that partner and the firm continued to check on me for the next 12 to 24 months. Hey, is it going okay? Do you need any help? Is it what you thought? Do you want to come back? And I know that we're going to talk about mentors.
Yeah, we are.
But in my career, I've never formally gone to anybody and said, hey, will you be my mentor? But I feel like there's always been people that have been kind of holding my shoulder and making sure I was okay, without formally being in the position of, hey, will you make sure I'm okay? So I think that the people that you encounter in your life, you might not know that they're thinking about you, and you might not know that they are champions for you, but the actions that they take ultimately indicate that they are your mentor and they're important ultimately for your journey. And I've been fortunate to have several of those.
Okay, so you leave Anderson. You don't have anything in your hand yet, but you end up at Price Grabber. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about Price Grabber, but I also wanted you to talk about your experience there, because you were there for almost 10 years. I mean, you started out as a director of account management, and then you essentially worked your way up over time to become the VP of business sales and development. And so I have a couple of questions surrounding this. One of which is, what led you to move from accounting into sales, right? And I think this is important for students to hear, because oftentimes they think, as I'm graduating college, I'm going to enter one field, and then this is the thing I've got to do forever. And I think you've made some really interesting career shifts during your time working. And so I'd love for them to hear about this, like what led you to make that shift. And also, because you were at Price Grabber for 10 years and you worked your way up, what did you learn there that really added to your leadership skills or taught you about leadership while you were at Price Grabber?
So Price Grabber, for those of you that don't know, it was a business founded in 2002 by really 5 best friends. And they created a shopping comparison website. I joined in 2002. It was founded in 1999. And it was created by five best friends, and these best friends saw a need in the market. So the initial founder was buying hard drives from Buy.com back in the day when Buy.com was heavily discounting hard drives, and he was selling them to Saudi Arabia. And Buy.com couldn't figure out how he could sell so many of these. And they said, hey, we want to pay you for advertising. We want to sell more stuff. And so he created a website, and he started charging them a cost per click, which in 1999 had never really been done. Overture and Yahoo were kind of doing a little bit of it. Google would come shortly after. And so they created this business that Amazon was one of their early clients. At the time, all Amazon sold was books and DVDs and CDs. So that company steadily gained traction, and it was really the place where you could decide what you wanted to buy. So super innovative. Experian bought it in 2005 for $500 million, which was just like a home run. And the idea for Experian was that they were going to integrate it into all the data that they have. So they know when you're buying a house and when you need a video camera for your baby. Now you have your phone and things like that. So I joined in 2002 in sales, and I joined because the girlfriend who became the wife of the founder of Price Grabber at the time was on the audit jobs with me at Arthur Andersen at Hilton Hotels. And she said, hey, you would be great in sales. Why don't you talk to my boyfriend? And I said, okay, I'll go talk to him. And I didn't really know anything about sales, but what I learned about sales was, more than anything, sales is relationships. And if you can talk to people and connect with people and have a conversation with people, that's worth 10 times the amount of the hard sale, the great close, the leading questions. And so that's what I learned there. I learned how to really connect with my customers and my clients. And I never tried to sell them, and they continually bought from me. So I think early on at Price Grabber, the team was pretty small, but they saw that I could form these relationships. And I enjoyed doing it, by the way. So when I was going to work, it didn't feel like work. That kind of sounds a little cliche, but it didn't. It was fun. And so I stayed there through the sale. And as I progressed through those years, I went to business school at a competing university. Sorry, LMU.
We won't mention it.
Right. And I was able to go to school part-time while I worked there, and I started leading bigger and bigger teams. So I think by the time I left, the team was 100 people that I led, and it was really a lot of fun. So I think at PriceScriber, I ended up staying for that long, 6 years, because all the founders left within maybe 2 or 3 of that business, because it became difficult to leave. They were paying me too much money, and I had too much responsibility, and it got to be fairly easy, and so you get comfortable. And when I noticed that I was getting comfortable, I felt like that complacency wasn't going to lead me to the next road that I needed to be on.
Did you feel like you were stagnating there a little bit?
I did. But it was difficult because of the money and the responsibility and the travel. I was getting to go to, Europe. We had a Europe office twice a year. I would end up bringing my wife. We would stack a vacation. It got to be very cushy. And when I realized that I wasn't being challenged, which was in like 2010, I started thinking like, I don't know if this is going to be for me for the long haul. So I feel like I've always kind of reached for something that felt like it was pulling me or pulling me away. And when I left PriceScriber in 2010 or 2011, I didn't have anything to go to. We had bought a home a couple of years earlier, and I had saved a little bit of money, but I didn't, the paradigm of when you leave a job, have a job, has never existed with me. Every position I've ever had, whenever I felt like it was time to go, I would go without like the safety net. And maybe that's a little reckless, but I've always felt that it's kind of like at the end of a good craps hand. I had plenty of wins on this hand, and it's time to get up and leave. And so leaving PriceScriber, I left on great terms, and it was time to go. And so for 6 months after PriceScriber, I read a bunch of books. I just had my first daughter. She was 12 months old, on partnering with your kids in play. And I came up with this idea that was partnering with your kids in play for the first 36 months of their life, the right toy at the right time, which, by the way, is now an actual company doing hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes.
And I called a friend of mine. His name was Brian Lee. And I had met Brian from PriceScriber. The CEO at the time was very close with Brian. Brian, if you don't recognize the name, he started LegalZoom with Bob Shapiro and a couple other guys. And the CEO of PriceScriber at the time said, "Hey, Brian, if you ever start another business, you should start it with Sean. He's a great operator, and he's fun to work with, and you guys would get along really well." So I called up Brian. I said, "Hey, I have this amazing idea," and he was, by the way, in the subscription business with Shoe Dazzle, if you guys remember that company.
Kim Kardashian.
It was Kim's first, really first collaboration and foray into business was with Brian. And when you walked into the Shoe Dazzle office at the time, it was just explosive with energy and people and collaboration. It was like just this electric place that was so fun to be in. So I called him and said, "Hey, Brian, I have this great idea." And I went to see him the next day, and it's the right time, the right toy delivered, and you're partnering with your kids in play. And he said, "That's a good idea, but mine's better. And I'm going to start a business with Jessica Alba, and I want you to start it with us and run it." And I was like, "I'll do that."
Yeah. Of course you did, you said. Of course you did. Which sort of leads me to my next question, right? And we'll talk about the Honest Company, but I want to backtrack a little and ask you, was that the moment that you discovered that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or had you always known? Because when I talk to many entrepreneurs, they tell me that they always feel like there was something in them that knew that eventually they had to create their own thing. Did you always know that, or was it that moment with Brian Lee where you're like, okay, this is the thing I got to do?
It's hard to say, did I always want to be an entrepreneur? What I always loved, and I still love today, is thinking creatively and movement and motion and getting things done. And what I've noticed is at companies, and Arthur Andersen was one of them, and I look back on the business with really fond memories, is that when an organization, because I've also seen it from companies that I've started, when an organization gets larger, the ability to innovate and change things and adapt and move big teams that you have to, you're forced to get buy-in from many different levels of people, other people that, you know, you started the company with. It gets difficult, and it becomes less exciting. So I think that led ultimately towards what you can do when you're part of a smaller organization, and the impact, and I'll get to that later, that you can have is significantly greater. And so whilst, yes, when I was in you know, first grade, I would go trick-or-treating, and then I would go to the same neighbors and try to sell them back my candy. I would participate in the jogathon at school and stand outside on the church steps, probably with Brian, and try to get, you know, raise as much money as I could for 4 weeks, two days of the weekends in a row. Working at the stereo shop as the youngest salesperson they had. Like, I've always been very much motivated and self-motivated. And I think that has lent itself well to kind of my tendency to want to go start things and feel that energy with, like, owning it. I don't think I understood the impact that you can have when you're the one that's making the decisions, and you're always kind of answering to somebody, your partners, your investors. But when you have the ability to set policy and set direction and choose strategy, the impact that you can have and the significant role that you can guide that business through, it just, to me, it's vastly greater than being at a part of a big organization where you have one role and one responsibility.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, because the smaller it is and you've started it, the more impact you're going to have. That makes absolute sense. I want to talk about Honest. So can we talk a little bit about it and your role as CEO? Okay, so obviously as a CEO, you're going to be responsible for strategy with respect to the company and where the company is headed. But I want to kind of dive into very specific strategies. Like, what was your strategy with respect to product development, raising capital, and marketing that led to Honest becoming the juggernaut that it did?
So what I think worked extremely well with the Honest, and by the way, I was president, but it's okay. I feel like in large part we all played a lot of roles there. Okay. What I think worked really well at times and not so well at other times is we had a great leadership team. Our co-founding partners were complemented by each other's strengths and supplemented by each other's weaknesses, such that, you know, I was the day-to-day operator of the company. And Brian was really in charge of investor relations and overall arching kind of, he's done this before, he's seen it. It's kind of like if you want to go to the dance, you want to go with somebody that's been there before, and he'd been there several times. Jessica, she had such an enthusiasm and a passion for creating products that she couldn't grow up with. She didn't have available when she was growing up, and by the way, made her kids sick when she started using. And then you had Christopher, and he was in charge of product. So you had all of these different capabilities. And going forward, what I've realized when I've left these places and I'm trying to start a new business is it's difficult to do it on your own. And for as confusing as you can get when you have 4 founders and then a CFO who's probably also a co-founder, and then you have a senior team of managers, that gets difficult to navigate. But it's even more difficult to try to start a business without a sounding board and without partners that are really kind of all working towards the same goal with their own capabilities. So I think that, you know, to go back to your question, what really worked well was all of us had a specific role, and we were all able to leverage our roles and that energy to get on this path. You know, we launched in a time at the Honest Company where there was no Shopify. You know, I remember Shopify and I think BigCommerce coming to talk to us back in 2017, and we're like, guys, we've been doing this for 2012. We solved subscription commerce. Why do we need you? But we did that with 80 people in data science and technology and QA and product management and design. Like the amount of money that we were spending in labor and overhead was ginormous because the tools and the capabilities weren't there. Now you can do everything that we did with probably like, one person. Which reminds me of, if you think back, like, not that any of us probably remember too well, but when they launched a space shuttle, they had a computer that was the size of a gymnasium, and now it's like your cell phone. So that's kind of what Shopify, I think, has done, and it's made the barriers to entry low. But when we launched, like, you needed to have a lot of money to pay a lot of people, and you needed to find somebody that had Ruby on Rails experience or Python. And guess what? All those guys are working for Facebook up in Silicon Valley. So it was a different time, and presented its own unique challenges. But I think we launched as a DTC brand, kind of early. This was 2012, and the day we went live, the website went live like 3 minutes before Jessica appeared on Ellen. So it was like, if it doesn't work, we're going to lose a lot of money. For the first 2 weeks, we weren't charging people's credit cards. We were just shipping out hundreds of thousands of dollars of diapers. And so when we realized it, we sent everybody a nice note that said, hey, we didn't charge you. Can we please charge you? And can you come back and pay us? And I remember kind of the first moment that it started to feel like something was changing with the brand. We got a call from Costco. And the buyer at Costco, her name was Janet Levinsky. And Janet said, hey, I'm the buyer from Costco, and we've seen your brand online. We'd love to buy it from you. And I remember we said, well, okay, if you're going to be in the area, we'd love to talk. So she flew down to see us, and we're in this meeting with Janet, and she said, okay, we want to do a full store rollout. You guys think you can do that? And we're like, yep, we can definitely do that. And David Parker, our CFO at the time, was like, I don't know if we should be doing this. Like, we're going to need a contract, and you're going to need to sign that you're going to do it. And she's like, I've been with Costco for 17 years. I'm telling you, I'm going to do it. You can trust me. But it was kind of an interesting place because, the CFO and David didn't fully believe that they were going to come through, and they did. And I'll tell you, selling one product to Costco it's a good business.
Was this the start of where you really begin to expand what Honest was? Because you started out as an e-commerce site with clean products for babies and kids, but over time, you not only expanded that product line into makeup and skincare, right? So really, you're creating a lifestyle, you're creating a brand for families that want clean products, but then you're also moving from e-commerce into retail. And was Costco the impetus for that?
Yeah, I think, look, we were a direct-to-consumer brand when it was hard to do, as I spoke about.
Yeah.
But also, there wasn't a direct-to-consumer brand that had gone offline, or one that I can easily rattle off.
Yeah, I don't think so.
This notion of digital first, but omni-channel was a new notion. Now, I think, now popular opinion has kind of gravitated towards, wow, well, Target and Walmart and Kroger and H-E-B and all these stores can drive a lot of volume. And you need volume, by the way, for scale. You need it to be competitive. You're competing against CPG brands that have been in business for 100 years, that have nailed their cost of goods sold, that can outmarket you, that can, with their pockets, that can outproduce you with the history that they have. So you need to be extremely nimble. So it turning into an omni-channel brand, really kind of like this light bulb went out that said, wow, you can bridge this gap. It is believable, and these brands, and our brand in particular, has a home outside of the relationship that we're forming with a customer. But we always want to maintain that digital first kind of, identity, because that's how you communicate, and that's how you have a voice, and that's how you speak. So you have your audience, your message, and your channel. And what we learned is they can work, symbiotically. And now it kind of feels obvious, but at the time it was new.
Yeah, very new. I mean, you were basically on the forefront of that, moving from e-commerce to retail, being one of the first to do that. I also really want to talk to you about leading teams. I mean, you alluded to this earlier, right? But I'm very curious to know, because obviously as president of this organization, you have to lead teams. And I want to know, what is your philosophy for leading teams? Like, what guides you? And where does it come from? Like, what from your previous work experience, your previous life experience, has contributed to forming how you think about and lead teams in the workplace?
There's so many ways that I think you could answer that. Um, I think that most of the learning that I've done in the positions and the roles that I've been in, I've learned from, and this is probably said often, but truly making mistakes. And those mistakes kind of have informed me to where I now I'm making less of them, and I'm able to see around the corner before I make them. And what I really look for in the teams that I work with is to not only make them, because I don't view that as a bad thing, but I want people to raise their hand and say, I just made a big mistake. And what I've learned is that the teams that are most effective, that that are the most successful, are the teams that people in the organization feel empowered to say, I made a mistake, or something is wrong and I don't know how to fix it. The times that we've run into the biggest problems, I would say, is when customers are bubbling up an issue, for instance, and we, as in senior management, don't catch wind of that issue, because every issue that comes from a customer who's on the front line is an issue that if you don't take care of, it can lead to more. And so back to your question about culture, it's really creating an open culture. So we would do frequent all hands meetings, but they were fun. We would plan lots of events around the office. We would celebrate almost every employee that started, not like in a cheesy happy birthday kind of way, but in like a full-on party type of way. We would do plank contests with whoever wanted to do it in the kitchen. I mean, I remember, and it was like out of control. But it's really, I think it's creating a culture of fun. We go to work because kind of like most of us have to, but you at work want to be with people that share your values, that are having fun doing it, and know that there's going to be a lot of mistakes that are going to be made, and can raise their hand and say, I made a mistake, and that's incredible.
I think, when you create spaces that are safe for your employees to say, I made a mistake, that's a huge deal. I think it engenders loyalty. I think it makes people want to show up to work and to work with you and for you. Because oftentimes employees don't feel like they can really say what they want to say at work. And so that's a huge thing, to be able to do that, and to create a culture that allows for people to be who they are in the workspace and feel good about it. I think that's amazing. All right, so when did you know, okay, it could have been Costco, because that's pretty huge of in itself, but when did you know that the Honest Company had made it? Was there a moment, or was it kind of a slow and steady build?
It was unique. Yes, I don't think I ever, and this was kind of, we had talked about this a little bit too. I feel like as an entrepreneur, at least, I'm not sure all of them, but I'm not sure as an entrepreneur you ever think you've made it. I always think tomorrow's the last day. Like, what shoe's gonna drop? What did I miss? What's gonna happen? Like, there's always doubt. And Brian and I were talking about it, and that kind of leads to a little bit of fear, but fear motivates you. Like, what do I need to do to make sure this absolutely works?
Yeah.
And so, I think that constant, like, okay, we got Costco, that was a little bit accidental, but now what? And then we went to Target. And we pitched Target's senior leadership team that the marketing leads of marketing came out to the Honest Company, very similar to how Costco did, and said, okay, we're thinking about you. What would you do if you were in Target? And we looked around a conference room. It was like kind of the size of the stage, maybe half as big, and said, we want to shop this big in every Target in America. And they were like, okay, that's ambitious. But then we went and we pitched the senior team, and the whole senior team at Target was there. and they hadn't really seen this celebrity-owned, founded brand type of model before, and they were like, yes, we're in. And so that was another proof point. And then we went to grocery, and that was another proof point. And so we keep checking off this box and pulling the levers, and we keep adjusting the offerings of our own site. I mean, at one point, the value proposition of Honest was better, safer for your family. And what we did was we were winning on ingredient sustainability. We were winning on price, relatively speaking. It wasn't overly prestigious. We were masstige, and we were winning on design. So we would offer the ability for parents who, your baby is kind of the most important thing when you have it, the ability to choose what their favorite design was. So we would offer 7 different sizes of diapers and over 20 different, or 7 different sizes and over 20 different designs. So if you were into rock and roll, we had music diapers. If you were into football, we would have football diapers. If you were into art, we would have abstract diapers. So all of a sudden, we allowed you to customize what still today is a category that's not customizable. Huggies doesn't do this because they have a machine of manufacturing, and it doesn't work with change orders. Same thing with Pampers. So the ability for parents now to get a month's supply of diapers in a world where you don't want to go to the grocery store or Target to get it, that the ability for us to innovate kept leading us towards, okay, we're still innovating, we're still innovating, we're still innovating. Now, to your point, then we got into beauty. And we got into beauty because we felt that we could extend into a lifestyle brand. And I think if you look at the brand now, 10 or 12 years later, the gap in the bridge has been successfully kind of crossed with, okay, it is a lifestyle brand. Beauty has its own identity. Baby has its own identity. And they can work together, as seemingly odd as it seemed at first. But when we were going through the launch of beauty, it was a little confusing internally. It was a hard mindset to be like, okay, we're going to post some Instagram media on babies and families, and then we're going to post some, really kind of forward beauty images with lipstick. So it's there's this paradigm and this dichotomy of, can those play together? And I think it took years for that actually to kind of feel organic.
Yeah, feel natural, like there was a flow. Yeah. Like this is for the whole family, not just the kids, right? Okay, so I kind of want to talk a little bit about this whole notion of celebrity-led brands, because I really think you were at the forefront of this, right? So you've had this, and this, which leads to my next question, right? You're having this great success at Honest. So first, what prompted your decision to leave Honest and start the next company that you did, which was Hello Bello with Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard, correct? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how the idea for that company came about. What was the purpose behind it?
So Hello Bello was an interesting business to start. The reason being is because I came from the Honest company, but I left Honest in early 2017, kind of late 2016, and I left because we got to that point where we were driving $300 million in revenue. We were about break even at the time. We had, I don't know, over, again, 300 employees. Like, we got to a place where it was a steady state business, that it was still growing and growing nicely. But, if we wanted to release a new product, we had a seven phase stage gate process. And if we wanted to do a new marketing channel, we'd get vast buy-in. If we wanted to go to China, we had to get every executive to say yes. It just got to be a place that, rightly so, required more legal kind of approval. And that, to me, I love the initial spark, and I love the fire, and I love the fast takeoff. Once the plane's in the air, and when we were taking the Honest company, when we launched the Honest company, it was like we were putting together while we were taking off. But once it's in the air and flying, that's less fun for me. That's like, I get less energy. And so I decided it was time to go, and left on great terms. And I worked for an EIR for a VC, as an EIR for a VC for a year. An EIR, for everybody, if you know or not, it's called an entrepreneur in residence. And the idea is, if you come up with an idea or you're in their ecosystem and they see a good fit for you, that's what you can do. And so I did that for about a year, and then I got this call from Walmart. I'd never talked to Walmart. The Honest Company didn't go to Walmart at the time. It is there now. And they said, hey, Sean, we haven't met, but we've heard your name, and we'd love to talk to you about our baby business. And I said, okay, that's cool, but you should talk to the Honest Company first. And so I connected the executives at both companies, and then I got this call like a month or two later, and they said, hey, you know, we've tried to reach out, but for whatever reason, we haven't been able to connect, and we'd really like to talk to you about our baby business here at Walmart. I said, okay. So I grabbed a close friend of mine at the time. Remember, I was talking about having other people that give you energy, that complement your strengths to work with, and his daughter and my daughter were at school in the area together, and we had become friends, and we said, hey, if we ever start another business, let's start it together. And so his name is Jay McGraw. He's Dr. Phil's son. His daytime job is that of being a television producer. So they own all of their network shows, and kind of they have an unfair advantage because they own these shows of being able to promote on these shows. So him and I went to Walmart, and we said, here, tell us what you're interested in. And they said, we're interested in a natural brand that's accessible to all income levels. Can you do that? And we said, let us figure it out and come back to you. So we started looking at our ability to manufacture diapers and shampoos, and we called up Kristen and Dax. And Kristen and Dax grew up in Detroit. They grew up without a lot of money, and I think that largely they think that there's going to be a day where they don't have a lot of money again. And they think that it's an injustice that their friends can shop at like really nice fancy stores and buy really nice fancy things, especially for their kids, and not everybody can. And so I remember sitting in their living room, and Dax stood up and he said, I want to plant this flag in the ground that says you shouldn't have to choose what's better for your baby and better for your budget. We're in. And you know, because for them it was personal, it was genuine, you know, and it was authentic. And you hear a lot about that, but I could really see that passion. And I've started other celebrity-based brands that haven't kind of taken off like that, but it's really because they were connected to the message. So we went back to Walmart and said, here's what it looks like. Here's what it is. We named it Hello Bello, really after their kids, because they would wake up and say, hi, Lincoln Bell Shepherd. And so it made a lot of sense. And so we launched it 9 months later. We drove hundreds of thousands of customers into Walmart. We took 20% of their space. We had everything from shampoo to lotion to bubble bath. We launched with diapers and we would change out styles every 3 months. And we built that company really fast. And then we decided to do some other things on the manufacturing side.
What was your strategy for growing Hello Bello? Did you take what you'd learned at Honest and bring it over to Hello Bello, or did you look at some of the things that had happened in Honest and you decided to change what you were doing at Hello Bello?
I think for me, I'm always motivated by growth. Yeah. I'm a big believer in growth. I think like with growth, you can start making decisions that you feel like are in the best interest of the long term of the business, even though in the short term, growth can be expensive. What I learned at the Honest Company, I think I had always been a proponent of mass retail. I'd always been a proponent of international growth. I'd always been a proponent of additional categories inside the core, and we did all of it. And we expanded past Walmart after about a year or so.
All right. So while you're taking on Hello Bello and growing that business, you also created Launched LA. Mm-hmm. And I understand Hello Bello was one of the brands really under the umbrella of Launched LA. Can you talk a little bit about Launched LA, its purpose, why you created it?
There was this thesis that there could be a notion or a shared service center, so to speak, that the X plus Y company that you started was that much easier than the X company that already existed, because you could leverage financial resources, not in terms of like capital, but in terms of fundamental personnel. You could leverage marketing strategies and personnel. You could leverage all of these things that are crossover between any number of different businesses. What we found was the idea in theory makes a lot of sense. But when you start talking, one of the businesses that we launched was an alcoholic seltzer business. So this was right after White Claw had launched, and we were working with John Taffer on mixers. And one of the buyers at one of the retailers came to us and said, "Oh, you know what? You guys are working on these mixers. That's great, but seltzers are really just killing it." And what we didn't realize at the time was seltzers, they have alcohol, which we knew, but what we didn't know is there's all these alcohol prohibition legacy rules. You can't be a manufacturer and a distributor. You need a new distributor in every state. You need this special tax license. Like all of these little things that to make that successful, you need a deep pockets. And in a world where everybody was in development of seltzers at the time, as soon as we launched, we were met with Corona launched and Coors launched, and there was a seltzer in every refrigerated kind of opening in the
Major competition.
Yeah, I mean, like crazy. So sometimes I guess the lesson is, or the lesson was, not every business can utilize the shared services because like the notion of what they are can be vastly different. The marketing strategies are typically vastly or should be vastly different. And in spaces that are new, that are attracting a lot of competitors, it's probably not the best place to like gravitate towards, unless you're faster to market. So that's kind of what we learned. So we launched a handful of other brands, and I think also what we found was Hello Bello was just really, really kind of, when you look at a revenue, resource, trajectory perspective, that's where we decided we should put most, or if not all, of our resources. So over time, I remember one of the early investors that we had, and a longtime friend, actually the founder of Price Grabber, had said, "Hey, you're starting these other businesses, but why don't you just focus on Hello Bello?" And I was like, "Well, because like we can create 4 of these or 5 of these and scale." And he was right. It's very difficult to create that many businesses and do them well. Not to mention the fact that you need teams that are individual and specialized in each one of those to do something like that.
Yeah, so way less crossover than the thesis.
Yeah.
Stated, so to speak. All right, so you were at Hello Bello for about 4 years, and then you left in 2022. What have you been doing since?
Yeah, so again, we got Hello Bello to a place that we felt really good about. We took a big investor on, and the investor started to really kind of tighten what they wanted to do, and look at the business that they wanted to form, and we were okay with that. And so really for the last 2.5 years or 2 years, I've been kind of doing a handful of things. I built a house, which was a major project, and I've been able to spend a ton of time with my kids. We moved to Texas. We moved to Texas because during COVID, we looked and tried to figure out where our kids could go to school in person, and it turns out that COVID, for whatever reason, didn't exist in Texas, so we moved there. And so we were also building a diaper factory in Waco. So we built the only U.S. manufactured diaper facility that was not Huggies or Pampers. We built a pretty massive complex, 300,000 square feet. We put 4 diaper machines in and a training pant line. And really, we were the only company that's manufacturing its own diapers at the time. So we moved in that regard. And so for the last really 2 years, I've been doing a handful of things, incubating lots of ideas. I've invested in a lot of different businesses. I'm an advisor to, a handful of different companies. And now that I've kind of done all of that and had some time, now I'm really right now working on 2 ideas that I think have a ton of promise. One is in social selling, and the other is back to CPG in a category that again will be celebrity based, but hasn't been touched by celebrity kind of ever.
I can't wait to find out what this is, Sean. All right, I kind of want to switch gears a little bit, maybe do some questions related to entrepreneurship, your thoughts on a couple of different areas that I want to talk about. But the first thing I want to talk about is actually related to CBA's mission, right? Students, faculty, you can all correct me if I'm wrong, but CBA's mission over the last few years has been to develop leaders with moral courage and creative confidence to be a force for good in the global community. And so I really want to break that down, and I want to ask you about moral courage. Okay, so here's the scene, right? You are called on to be really courageous and brave in your work or in your career, but you are afraid, right? Like this is that kind of fear like that we feel in the back of our throat, in the pit of our stomach. I think you all have felt it, whether it's exams, whether it's work. And I want to know, when you get that feeling, number one, what is the first thing you do? The very first thing you do. And then I also want to know, how do you overcome fear and doubt that faces you in the workplace? Because we all face that. And I want to know how you deal with that. But first, I want to know, what's the first thing you do when you feel fear?
Well, I think that fear is good. I think that fear drives us, it motivates us, as long as it doesn't grip a hold on us. If you can manage it, then it can be a really positive motivating force rather than a negative one. And I think everybody is scared at some point about something. I think the first thing that I do is I try to really put it in perspective. Your health and your family's health and your friend's health is generally the most important thing. And the second most important thing is you get to spend the time that you have doing the things you want to do, and what enables you to do that in many cases is your ability to have succeeded somewhere at some point. So I think the first thing I try to do is I really try to put that fear into perspective. What's number one, the worst thing that can happen? Number two, what are the other alternatives? And what should I really be worried about? For a lot of the times, and early in my career at Price Grabber, I would say, we're not saving lives to try to calm people down when there was a big catastrophe. And we had lots of catastrophes while I was at the Honest Company. It was hard. It was a hard business. But ultimately, when you put it in perspective and you realize that there's more at stake with the bigger picture, then that issue that you're facing in the moment becomes less significant to you.
Okay, then can you give us an example of where you had to exercise moral courage and what the outcome was? Because you did.
Yeah, I think it's always difficult when you have a product issue and you're running a CPG company. And I remember we released a cosmetics item, and the cosmetics item was using an ingredient that was an approved ingredient, but it would make your eyes tear. So if anybody has used a mascara in the past and it's impacted you, I mean, I'm not a user of mascara, but my wife is, and she would apply makeup in the car, and we got to this place where we were getting complaints about eye stinging. And I'll tell you, pulling off a product that is not kind of your lane because it's beauty, because you don't use that product, but you understand the ultimate impact that it can have, it takes I think, a lot of courage to go up against kind of the people that have a vested interest in seeing that product, sold right now, not facing the fact that maybe something is wrong with it. And so that's kind of a thing where you just kind of have to raise your hand and say, no, we got to do the right thing here. And Dr. Phil, Jay's dad, always has this great line that says, if you didn't make the right decision, make the decision right. And you always have the chance to do that. So whenever you're in doubt, you can always make the right decision. There's a book right now called Think Again.
Yes.
It's several years old at this point, but he talks a lot about thinking it again and thinking it over and changing and questioning. And so if something doesn't seem right and you question it, the worst thing that can happen ultimately is you're going to fall out of the funnel. And by that I mean, that's kind of big companies speak for. You could probably move up and progress a long time through a big company as long as you don't send an emotional email. Try to never do that. Don't get drunk at a party, right? and don't get in an argument with your boss. Like, that's the big company funnel. As long as you stay in that, you're going to move up pretty progressively. Where you might fall out is if you get into an argument about something that you think is morally or ethically wrong, because it can be very unpopular. But at the end of the day, if you're met with resistance about something that you believe in, there's another job out there for you and for your beliefs, and you don't have to compromise your beliefs. And that's scary, because you know that if you lose this job or you don't have this job, then what are you going to do? And then that becomes even more scary. But ultimately, it's not, and it's hard to realize that.
Okay, well, let's talk really the second half of this mission, which is creative confidence. I want to know, because I really think that look, I think many people think creativity exists in art and music and fashion, but frankly, I think creativity can be found and utilized in any career that you're in, whether that's creative problem solving, whether that's creating new programming, creatively leading. And so I want to know what inspires your creativity and how do you bring your creativity to work?
I think that's the most fun. It's the most fun thing to do is to dream. What can you dream of? Every company out there was started by a person or two people or three people, whatever it was, and they all had an idea. So I really, like, deep in my heart, I believe that anybody can come up with anything that's the next mind-shattering thing. And you just have to exercise and flex those muscles. Spend some time thinking about problems that you face. Think creatively. And I always kind of like to think everybody has lots of ideas. And often we have an idea and we're a little reluctant to talk to somebody about it because we think they're going to steal it from us. What I've realized is it's not necessarily the idea that you first bring, because it's the last 5% of the idea that really matters. And here's a good analogy. Our bodies run at 98.7 degrees. I'm not a doctor, but I think so, from science. And if you're at 97.7, something's wrong. And if you're at 99.7, something's wrong. So that little turn of the dial with your idea into the right pocket probably comes from a conversation that you had with somebody that you at first weren't sure if you were going to tell, or number two, you didn't know that they would add any value. So I think that there's a lot of value to talking to as many people as you can, to sharing, to getting those ideas, not being fearful that they're going to steal your idea. It's really hard to execute an idea, especially one that costs money to pursue. So it's kind of like really hone in and figure out how to dial in that idea. It's the last 5% that matter.
Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit, because I think you have a very interesting take on mentorship. And I want to talk about that. And so I want to ask you, who have been your mentors, some of them, and how did you find them? And what did they provide for you?
I think I mentioned this a little earlier.
You did.
I think that the mentors that I've had, I've never formally gone to and said, hey, will you be my mentor? Although I have been asked, and I'm honored to be asked to do that. But in the case that I look back on my career, it was, the partner at the accounting firm, the manager at the accounting firm. It was Troy Varenchek, who was here. It was Trey Duvall, who had worked with Lisa back in the day. It was it's my mom and her pursuit of excellence. It's almost like all of these people, kind of I'm really on their shoulders. It's Brian Lee from the Honest Company. It's Jay, who's my partner at Hello Bello. It's a ton of people, and not just my peers, but people that I've supervised also. So your mentors come in kind of, many different ways, but it's recognizing that the impact that they're having on you is significant. And that's what I've always found, I've always circled back to the people that I know that I've built this connection with. And I'll tell you, it really wasn't a popular notion with the people at the Honest Company that I started Hello Bello. But the people that I had built those connections with, they were able to look past that, and they continue to foster close ties and close relationships.
I think there's something to that. When people see something in you, they lift you up. They want to help you out. you know, and not that there's anything wrong with people asking actively for mentorship, but I think sometimes, I know for me, when I see someone coming to me and doing good work for me, then I want to help them. I want to bring them up. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah, 100%. And what I found is, I really value a sense of urgency. I really value loyalty, and I think I really gravitate towards those things because those things were instilled from me from those people.
Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about some of your habits and routines. So I don't know if you all know Tim Ferriss, but he often talks about entrepreneurial habits and routines that make entrepreneurs, I should say, successful. And so I want to know, Sean, what are your daily habits and routines that you think have contributed to your success, both in work and in life? What do you do?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. Maybe contributed or distracted, but I'm not a great sleeper. So I find myself like trying to find some kind of comfortable place every night around the house, 100 different places to sleep. But I will wake up early regardless, and I will hit a gratitude journal that's next to my bed, and I'll try to write 3 things, and it can be like the sunset from yesterday, or something nice that somebody did, or our conversation here today, or Peter's visit, 3 weeks ago. We had a nice chat. Or the fact that Lisa over here was the admissions officer when I got into LMU. So I'll start with that, and then I have a cold plunge, which I'll hit at 49 degrees for 3 minutes.
Oh,
And I'll do that in the morning.
you are brave. You are brave, Sean.
I love it. It is really incredible. If you haven't done it, you should do it. It's great. And then it's time to kind of get the kids to school. So I'll make my son some eggs, and I'll make my daughter an egg sandwich. We'll both hop in the car. I'll drop them off, and then I'll kind of come back home and start my day. And the nice thing about all that is 3 hours or 2 hours have kind of already happened in that day. And so this feeling of like, I did something already, it's motivating to now do the next thing. It's like, I've been kind of lazy on my getting to the gym routine. But when you start going to the gym and you get there for a week and then 2 weeks and then 3 weeks, it's like you don't want to stop because you're now motivated to keep going with what you started.
I love that. All right, I want to know, because I know many of our students who are entrepreneurs, you're getting lots of advice from all over the place. And so I want to know from you, Sean, what is the best piece of entrepreneurial advice you've been given, and what was the most overrated piece of advice given to you?
Oh, best piece. God, there's so many good pieces. I think one of the most memorable was, and Brian said this, if you have an idea, just get up and do it. Because if it were easy, everybody'd be doing it.
That's true. That's true.
My wife started a podcast. She's a true crime podcast. And one day I was like, you keep talking about doing a podcast. And she started 5 years ago. And so she's like, you're right. I'm just going to start it. And she did. And so I think that's the one thing. Like, if you are thinking about doing something, just do it. And kind of get out of your own way. And if it were easy, everybody'd be doing it. The advice that I've heard that I don't necessarily buy, is that what you're asking?
What's the most overrated piece of advice you've ever been given?
I think that, I don't know if it's the most overrated, but I think that the days of going into work and being there all day and working hard to kind of get to the next level, I think that's valid, and there's something to be said about that. But I think today it's a little bit different. The people that I want to work with are the people that are innovating with me, that are telling me things that I don't know, that are kind of putting their thoughts and their opinions out there, knowing that that could be received poorly, I guess, or being fearful that. So I think it's, the days of just coming and doing what you do and being present, those are gone. You got to come in, you got to adapt, you got to be enthusiastic, and you have to think differently. You have to think creatively, and you have to communicate those ideas to the people around you. So I think you got to do more than work hard these days. And yeah, working hard is important, but it's coming every day with, what can we do different? How can we move this further along?
Okay. So this is my last big question, and then I got a little speed round for you, and then I want to open it up to the audience because I know they've got questions for you too. What's one piece of advice now that you've gone along this career journey? What's one piece of advice you'd give young Sean and these guys here at LMU? What would you tell him?
I think I would say always feel empowered to adapt. And as soon as you start feeling a little restless, go do something different.
Fair enough. All right, I got a quick speed round for you. You ready? 60 seconds. Okay. What is something people often get wrong about you, Sean?
I think it's a founder thing. When you found a company, people think you're unapproachable. I love to be approached, and I love to be told that I'm doing something wrong.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't know if I think you'd want to be told you're doing something
Yeah,
wrong, but I can
definitely. Please tell
appreciate
me.
that. I can appreciate that. Okay, last TV show you binged and loved.
President Snyder told me Drop of Blood, right, Peter? You've been watching it? Drops of Blood. Drops of Blood. That's
Drops of
right.
God.
I keep thinking blood because it's about wine, but it's a pretty fun watch.
All right, good. Concert that you've been to that you'll never forget.
U2, The Sphere. Second, that's the first.
Me too.
It was
Me
amazing,
too.
right?
Amazing.
Easy one. The second one
Easily.
was Justin Timberlake. He was really fun, and he has a bar next to the pit of the stage.
Yeah, he's
so
great. Who doesn't love him? Okay, what's on your nightstand? And if there's a book, tell us what you're reading.
I just moved, so what's not on my nightstand is probably a better question. And what I'm reading, I think again.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
you just talked about that. All right, think again. All right, give us a snapshot of an ordinary moment in your life that brings you extraordinary joy.
Ordinary moment, extraordinary joy. I think sitting down at the end of the day and watching a movie with my daughter, my son.
Yeah, that's amazing. Time with your kids is phenomenal. All right, this is my last question. Tell me one thing that you are deeply grateful for today.
I'm deeply grateful today for the chance to be here today.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. All right, I think we should open up the floor for questions. You guys, questions? Do we have a mic? Here. You know what? I'm going to walk around, Sean.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. This has been very insightful. I just wanted to, you've worked with so many different people and you've had to partner up with so many different people. What are your green and red flags when choosing who to work with on that level?
It's so hard to know what the green and red flags are. I think that what I've learned is as I work with people again and new people coming into the organization, I'm kind of not the first to see the red flags because the connectivity tends, like I said, people tend to feel like you become a little unapproachable. But when I start to hear things from people that I have worked with for a long time that are indicative that there's an issue, usually where there's smoke, there's fire. And so I really try to vet that out as soon as I can. So it's good to have people around you that you trust that will tell you what's going on in the organization that you're connected to. Because it's kind of like if you have one bad seed in working with you, it can really pollute the entire company. So you need people that are on a shared mission. They don't care. Ronald Reagan had this great plaque behind his desk, and he said, "It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." And that truly is it. So, in any organization, if the management is in tune with what's going on, they know who's responsible for everything because the people that are responsible will be given credit by their peers and by their supervisors and by their directs. So it really is maintaining a real good feeling for what's going on in the organization and encouraging people to talk to you about it.
Thank you.
Who was the? Yeah, thank you again for coming here tonight. You briefly mentioned this earlier, how your mentors reached out to you over the period of like 12 to 24 months. I wanted to expand on that further. How exactly do you keep in contact with those you've been in contact with? Because I find it easy to talk to someone and then just not talk to them for a period of time.
Yeah, you do have to be proactive. You have to make it a point to circle back and have those conversations and grab a coffee. You know, you don't necessarily have to have a purpose or a goal. It's like, hey, let's catch up, and let's do it every 2 or 3 months. And so I think that, you know, living in Dallas now, I'll try to get here once a month or even more frequent, and I'll try to connect with six of those people that I've maintained those relationships with. But you have to be proactive about it, because it's not just going to happen. And if you go 2 years or a year, then it's kind of like, well, how you been? It's been a long time. So it is something to maintain and keep on top of.
Thanks for coming in again. I guess a quick question I had was, since you've been in like the same industry with baby stuff, working on multiple ventures, have you found yourself having to be more careful with how you go about the next venture, not to replicate or break like a contract from the previous venture?
Yeah, I tend to California is kind of unique in that non-competes aren't enforceable in California, but really kind of the relationships that you build along the way at retail, people change roles so often that the risk of, the risk of of utilizing something from your past, it's not really applicable, or it hasn't been in my case. I think where that would probably be applicable is software, where you're coding and you're in data, and there's a line of code that you use. Kind of in personal care, and I'm a co-owner of a manufacturing business for personal care products. Shampoo can be made. There's like a million different permutations of what you can put in a skincare item. And so, Johnson & Johnson has a formula, the Honest Company has a formula, California Baby has a formula, Hello Bello has a formula, La Roche-Posay has a formula, all of these different companies, and it's all lotion, but it's all varying degrees of what it is. So I think that you have to be mindful and ethical, but I think it's for me at least, it's been easy to separate, one business from another.
This is kind of a silly question, I think. So in your house, do you use Honest products or Hello Bello?
Ooh, that's such a good one. Oh man.
To make you pick a side.
That's such a good photo. Well, or such a good. I say photo because we have a picture of my daughter when she was 18. She was one of our first Honest Company models. So it adorns the wall outside of her bedroom, and she does not like that. We actually have both, because we have so much love for both of those businesses. So not a singular one.
First and foremost, thank you very much for coming. It was really insightful, and I really enjoyed the time. I wanted to bring it a little bit closer to the students and to the school by asking you about your interaction and your ideas or any advice in general when it comes to the new generation coming into the marketplace, and how do you feel, or what it's needed, what are you looking for, and do you happen to have a touch now when it comes to the internships, to the entry levels? Do you get to see what this new generation or what this forefront is bringing to the table and what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. Skill sets and needs for kind of new grads. What I've learned is over time, and for those that are majoring in accounting or science or entrepreneurship, it to me, the people that I've worked with have come from all different disciplines. You know, I've loved to hire people from all kind of different places. You know, I look for people that are intelligent, that have a sense of urgency, and are loyal, or seemingly will be loyal. We do a handful of internships at kind of all of the businesses that we've started. You know, the interesting thing is you guys have a skill set that I don't have. You know, the connectivity to social media, your understanding of how they play, and the interconnectivity of all of the social media sites, influencers. It's really a different world, and the thing is, it's changing every day, fast. You know, live streaming shopping, social commerce, e-commerce. It's all accelerating, and the advantage that you all have is that you understand it, and you're living it, and you're playing with it every day. So the skill set that you have, you know, it's critical, and I think that those are the skill sets that are of the moment. Your ability to understand what's going on in the current environment, how to utilize AI to do things quicker, faster, more efficiently. You know, I just looking at things like creating a presentation. You know, 10 years ago, creating a presentation could take you, you know, 30 days and look terrible. Today, you could do it in like 8 hours, and it can look like full-on masterfully designed. So the things that you can do and that you're working on Figma, and you're working on Canva, and you're working on, you know, all of the AI, the visual tools. Like, those are the skills that separate you guys from everybody that's currently in the workforce, because everybody there today is getting stale. Every day they're getting more stale, and every day you're getting more competitive because you understand how it goes. And people that I'm working with, you know, they're kind of doing the same thing they've done for a long time. They like run Facebook ad campaigns, and they're utilizing influencer marketing, kind of how they knew how to do it. But you guys, just, you understand things a whole lot better than probably most people in the workforce today.
Thank you to Sean for joining us today.